bridal chambers. This was the marriage of the male to the female. The marriage of the male to the female is Osiris and Isis. Osiris and Isis come together, and this culminates in the birth of Horus, who is also essentially the character Osiris, just reborn, just resurrected. There's a Greek historian named Porphyry, and he describes that these priestesses, known as bees, were called Melissae, M-E-L-I-S-S-A-E, Melissae. This was a group of bee nymphs, so bees that were the female creative force that were dedicated to teaching mankind. So if you said the bee taught mankind, the bee was wise. The bee is a symbol that represents a group of individuals that were a part of the mysteries. It doesn't mean that these creatures like Beedrill from Pokemon came down in beehive spaceships and started teaching mankind about how to extract honey from a hive. It's a symbol. And the story about Melissa that I found interesting when I looked a little bit deeper into this, when I learned about this, reading about the Greek historian Porphyry, is that Melissa refused to divulge the secrets, and this wasn't one individual. Melissa was a title like Christ or Christos, or even like Krishna, or like Mary Magdalene, or Ma, the female creative principle, and Re, the goddess, Ma, Re, like Ra, Ma, Ga, 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 Ra, the fire male principle, the chief god in Egypt of the sun, Ra, Ma, the female principle, Gaga, Gugu, Gaga, the baby, male, female, child, Ra, Ma, Ga, Ga, Ga. Also not a coincidence that Lady Gaga uses that type of symbolism in her lyrics. So this character, this archetype Melissa, refused to divulge the secrets to the mysteries and was dismembered as a result. That is identical, not even similar. It is identical to the story of Hiram-Abiff, the builder of Solomon's temple, refusing to give the master mason word to 3 individual masons who wanted to, without overcoming the trials of life symbolically, without bettering themselves, without conquering their demons, they wanted access to the mysteries. And Hiram-Abiff said no. And so symbolically he was struck down with the hammer, with the square, with the mallet. He was struck in the head. He was dismembered with the I believe he was dismembered with the ruler. He was struck down with the symbols of masonry, and he died. And this happened in a symbolic manner as well, because it happened in the different west, east parts of the temple that was being built for Solomon, when Solomon also means Solomon, Sol, the sun, O and Mon, Solomon. This all means sun. The 3 syllables Solomon all means sun, sun, sun. Sun is very powerful. It's a symbol. Doesn't mean someone named Solomon didn't exist. Doesn't mean someone like Jesus didn't exist, although Jesus was a title. And so these characters, these archetypes, these titles were held by females. They were held by women who assisted initiates in the bridal chambers, the sacred union. That sacred union was the phallus and the yoni. The sacred union was fire and water. The sacred union was the upright triangle and the downward triangle. And when you fuse them together, you get the seal of Solomon, otherwise known as the Star of Saturn, the 6-pointed star. You can see that on the Second Temple in Temple Square, the Mormon Church. They have a very large 6-pointed star. They have a very large 6-pointed star in between 2 pillars. So that's not coincidental that symbol is used. And a lot of the symbolism used by the Mormon Church is Judaic in nature, although the Judaic symbolism is even much older than Judaism. A lot of religions just simply borrow from other religions, and so this symbolism here in particular relates back to an even older time, to a time perhaps forgotten, a time in which there was a worship of another planetary body, perhaps Saturn. And Saturn becomes very important in this symbolism because right in front of this temple in Temple Square in Salt Lake City, in front of this 6-pointed star, there is another fountain with an obelisk on it. And that fountain has a geometric shape around it with 6 sides. It has the hexagon. If you take that hexagon, depending on which way you look at it, and you draw triangles through it, you get the Star of David, the Seal of Solomon, the Star of Saturn. That's on the Mormon Church as well. As I mentioned earlier, if you look at the giant temple that looks like a castle from Disney World, you see the phases of the moon around the middle part of the temple. All of these are pictures I took. They're all on the website. And at the very top, you see symbols of the sun shining all the way around the top. You also see there is a picture of one of the entranceways to the Mormon Church. The 2 door handles, which were locked, I tried to get in, I couldn't get in. They were locked. The 2 door handles, and then above the door handles, this very large metal relief, and in the center of it, there is a beehive. Again, the beehive is a symbol of divinity, a symbol of enlightenment. The beehive serves the same type of purpose as the serpent mounds, as the sacred sites that are adorned with temples and pyramids, some of which are simply amplifying the natural energy of that spot. Others might be more artificial to create for ritualistic practices, chanting, instrument playing, sacred forms of rituals that include a ceremony dedicated to a particular god or goddess, perhaps one of nature. Whether organic or synthetic, that beehive represents what those temples represents. It also represents brotherhood. And on that symbol, that's on the front and the back end, and I didn't actually look at the direction, but I would think that these 2 entranceways on the temple in Temple Square in Utah, Salt Lake City, are probably the west and the east of the temple, is what I would presume without even looking at it. If anybody knows that, I'd love to get some information about it, rdgable@yahoo.com. But if you go in there and you look at that symbol I posted from the photograph, there's a beehive, and then there are 6 bees. There are 6 bees buzzing around the beehive. So there's the number 6 again, going back to that 6-pointed star of David, the Seal of Solomon, or the Star of Saturn. And there's also something called the Magic Square. There's the square again, Temple Square. There's the Magic Square of Saturn. The Magic Square of Saturn has a total of 9 individual squares inside of a bigger square, and each square in line, horizontal and vertical, adds up to the number 15. Now, the number 15 in numerology is actually 6, and so 15, 15, 15 becomes 6, 6, 6. Now, that doesn't mean that it's demonic or that it's evil or that it's the devil, because the magic square of the sun, with various squares, it's a much larger magic square, each vertical and horizontal column adds up to 111. 111 times the 6 vertical horizontal columns gives you 666 as well. And so there are said to be 3 suns. The magic square of the sun is 666. The magic square of Saturn is 15, 15, 15, but numerologically it is 666. The 3 suns are the intellectual sun, Nikel, the spiritual sun, Soroth, and the material sun, otherwise known as the black sun, the forger, like Ta on the potter's wheel in Egypt, of the material world. Saturn, Ta, Typhon, whatever name that you'd like to give to this energy. The 4 elements, 4 cherubim, fire, water, air, earth, represented by the pentagram, and the 5th point protruding from the top is consciousness ascending from the 4 points of the material world, the square. The material sun, the square, the 4 in 3 dimensions is a black cube. The 666 of Saturn, the 6 is the hexagon, the 6 sides of the hexagon. That symbol is also one of the 2 large fountains in Temple Square, Salt Lake City, Utah, the Mormon Church, or the Mormon Temple, whatever you'd like to call it. That 6 in the hexagon creates the 6-pointed star. And so you have 6 bees, the 6 points of the star. The bees were the nymphs that assisted the initiates in the bridal chambers, uniting the male and the female into that 6-pointed star of Saturn, or that 6-pointed star of Solomon. The beehive represents brotherhood. community, enlightenment. It was further symbolized by a cave or by a pyramid, something that is an artificial or an organic type of womb. Caves were very significant because caves typically had a damp, moist feel to them anyway, which was yonic in nature. And, of course, associated with the beehive is the honeycomb. And the honeycomb is something you also see on the Mormon church. You see the honeycomb. You zoom in on one of the photos. If you go to the website and you go to www.thesecretteachings.info and you click on the promotion for the Mormon church, it's called Mormon Worship with the M and the two O's and the N capitalized, Moon Worship. You look at the pictures that I took, and I posted them right on the website. You can freely access them. Zoom in. They're super high quality. You zoom in and you look at the moon as distinct from the sun, and there's the different phases of the moon. And the different phases of the moon, there is where the moon is partly missing, where the moon is partly shadowed, there is a honeycomb structure there, a honeycomb structure. And that honeycomb structure, the honeycomb as a symbol, that honeycomb structure represents personal insight and divine wisdom. It represents harmony because of the honeycomb is usually hexagons, the hexagon nature. The honeycomb, you can even see that in the peel of a banana if you look close enough at the white on the other side of the yellow. And it represents harmony in nature because it's something natural. It's harmonious, like a spider's web. It's beautiful. It's sacred geometry. It demonstrates the fundamental foundation of reality. And then above, all around the church, above the moons, above the honeycomb, above the beehives, and below the sun, there are 5 pointed stars all the way around. And the 5 pointed star is the star of Venus, the star of Lucifer, as some might refer to it as. And that 5 pointed star, a star of Venus, Melusine, Starbucks logo, a powerful symbol, is thus associated with the shell and the water fountain at the Mormon church because the shell births Venus. The seashell, the scallop shell births Venus. The water, intricately associated with the female, the birthing waters, the fluidity of the water, the curves. The shell in the water, that is the goddess. That is the birth of Venus. The water of baptism. And, of course, Venus traces out every 8 years. There are a 4-year and another 4-year, and then within that 8 years, you have 5 times to get a 40-year cycle. Venus traces out this pentagram form in the heavens. And within the 8-year cycle, split in two, Venus rises in the west as the evening star, the setting sun, where the initiates enter the western side of the temple. And the next 4 years, Venus rises in the east as the morning star, the rising sun, where the initiates exit the temple. So the moon is the great reflector in the sky. Monday is named after the moon. Moon Day, Monday, just like today is Sunday, the day of the sun. Yesterday was Saturday, Saturn Day, the day of Saturn. The word month comes from moon or month. Month. Remove one of the O's. Month. The 12 months are even based on the 29-day cycles of the moon. I think the cycles are like 29.53, but it's a 29-day cycle. And from the Latin word for month, mensis, we get menstrual, as in the menstrual cycle. So the moon, the water, menses or menstrual, we get the association directly with the female. Venus was a Roman goddess, or you might know her as Aphrodite in Greek. That 8-year pattern of the movement within a larger 40-year pattern resulted in the western rising of the evening star, or the eastern rising of the morning star, the setting sun versus the rising sun. Or, if you know Kabbalah or Baphomet, you see the two different moons. You'll see the white moon and the black moon. The white moon is Chesed. The white moon is the morning star. And the black moon is Gibaru, or Gibara. That is the setting sun. That is the evening star. The other part of that pattern over 40 years, traces out the pentagram. That pentagram is also on Baphomet's head. And that pentagram, the 4 points, the fifth rising out of the 4 points of materiality, right on the head of Baphomet, between the two pillars, the two horns of apparent contradiction, like the High Priestess stands in the tarot card, and like we saw Beyonce stand between the two pillars at the Super Bowl a couple of years ago, with her cross on her chest, which is just like the initiates were with the cross. The High Priestess has the cross on her chest, holding the sacred scroll, sacred knowledge. The High Priestess also wore, as we discussed earlier, the crimson robe. And the Hierodol later became the harlot. The red robes of Ritu with the ritual became the robes, not of truth, but the robes of the Scarlet Woman, the Scarlet Lady. Like Lilith, the Scarlet Woman who is opposed by the church for her power, the ability to give life. And so that pentagram that's traced out in the sky by Venus, it's on the head of Baphomet. It points to the flaming torch in between the two pillars. People think Baphomet's an evil character, but when you start to look at the symbolism, Baphomet has one arm pointing up toward the white moon, one arm pointing down toward the black moon, one arm pointing up toward the rising sun and the morning star, one arm pointing down to the setting sun and the evening star. The character is androgynous in nature. The character has the two horns that are pointing upward. The character has the flaming torch in the middle. These are all characteristics entirely different than Le Diable Tarot, the Devil Tarot. Devil Tarot has the horns pointing down. The torches held down by the devil character representing the false light, the infernal world, the false light that leads those of us who allow it astray. The false light that is utilized by institutional religions, mostly, knowingly or unknowingly, on a macrocosmic level, and by the microcosmic level of people who say that they can access the Akashic records for you for $100, that the images of the lotus buds in Egypt are actually light bulbs, that the pyramid as a symbol of ascension is literal. You are going to ascend to another world, a crystalline world. These are false prophets. These are con men. These are false idols. Now, the horns of Baphomet, just like the horns of El Diable, the horns of Baphomet, just like the horns of Taurus the bull, Cernunnos, the Greek god, Pan of the forest, Isis or Venus, the horns come from a variety of places. This is where horniness also comes from, but the horns come from the bull, Taurus the bull, slayed by Mithra or Mithras in Rome. The horns come from the movement of Venus from the west to the east. And the way that it's viewed from the earth, on the western side to the eastern side, it kind of creates this, to the observer, from the eye of the observer, the viewpoint of the observer, it creates this type of horn. But also Baphomet or Capricorn, that's the house of Saturn. So Capricorn, the goat, the two horns, that's the house of Saturn. There are a lot of reasons why that character, known as Satan, has the devil horns, as they call them. There's also characters like the Norse god of the goddess. There's also characters like the Norse goddess of the underworld, Hel, Hel, Norse goddess of the underworld, Hel. There are characters like the Akkadian god of the moon. The Akkadian god of the moon is Sin, S-I-N. And so followers of Yahweh, as opposed to sin, were called sinners in Akkadian. Sinners. Yahweh's living symbol was also the moon. So the reason that Yahweh's symbol is the moon, directly associating Yahweh with Sin, the Akkadian god of the moon, was because the god of the moon was also a god of war. Like Ares, like Mars, the god of war, not the video game, but the god of war was Jehovah. Jehovah is often depicted with a shield and a sword. God Jehovah is a god of war. Yahweh was a god of storms, a god of pestilence and plague. There's an Egyptian god of the sun named Mais. He's also a god of plagues, and he has a lion's head, the mane representing the corona of the sun. These symbols are all over the Mormon Church. These symbols are all over the Catholic Church. These symbols are all over almost every institutional form of religion, one way or another, whether they are these direct symbols of the sun and the moon or they are symbols that have the same type of powerful meaning, just in perhaps a different way. And whether it's the Super Bowl or the Olympics, whether you're watching a football game on Sunday night, all of these events are ritualistic in nature. Getting up and going to work in the morning is ritualistic in nature, but we have to disassociate the ritual of everyday life from the rituals that are intentionally performed with the energy and the attention of the world to promote something perhaps political, something corporate, or perhaps something much, much darker. Because if we define the word ritual is a solemn ceremony consisting of a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order. Magic is the power to apparently influence the course of events by using mysterious or supernatural forces. It is symbolic action. And so by establishing a ritual, utilizing what you have available, a massive platform like the Super Bowl, a massive platform like the Olympics, even smaller platforms like music videos where hundreds of thousands of people are going to watch. You use the platform with a series of actions performed according to a prescribed order, how you set it up, the choreography, the lyrics, something about the music. This becomes, as a symbol, a form of action which can influence the course of events by seemingly mysterious or supernatural forces. I don't know why I like that song so much. I don't know why I keep buying that product. It just looks good. It's not just because it looks good, it's because you're directly influenced by magical powers to buy it. I don't mean somebody's waving a magic wand, but symbolically they are. You know, the first time I looked